Hi, I'm Vyoma Rao, and today we have the pleasure of interviewing a young and dynamic entrepreneur who has experimented a lot with his career in a very short span of time. I'm here to welcome Vipul Jain. Vipul, before I, spill the beans and tell people what you actually do, would you like to, introduce yourself briefly?
Thanks, Rama. I mean, it's a glad being on Finance Story, sharing my journey to the fellow entrepreneurs. Happy to be here. If I just take a quick stab at it, of course, experimentation is a key for evolution. Anything which has been evolved. I think for me, if I have to if I have to give a quick introduction about myself, so as a chartered accountant, worked as a risk advisor, then eventually got into as a transaction advisor, and perhaps later got into my entrepreneurial strength, testing the waters, and now I'm actually taking my own journey. I've been following my instinct so far, and then perhaps will do it in the future. I think that's how my career has been crafted. And that's a brief introduction. That I've been like very agile, and I've been very experimenting, throughout my career line so far.
So, you were associated with the Antler in the team, and they said that Vipul is very agile and is able to exercise first principle thinking. What does that mean, and was it very important for you?
From the day I started my journey as a chartered accountant, working as a risk advisor with the Grand Thornton, I happened to work with a diversified set of team there. Worked as a risk advisor, did like something which was beyond internal audits, got into like risk advisory, got into management consultancy, operation optimization, and so on and so forth. Sooner I realized that okay, I've done enough of that, and that's when I decided I'll move further. I'll experiment with something else, and then perhaps I got into this team into Ernst & Young, which is very niche into dealing with a lot of transactions. Initially, of course, it was very tough because the sort of dynamics play which happens every day. You advise a lot of founders, you meet a lot of founders, you have different problem statement, you have different set of clientele, which is quite diversified. And in fact, everything is the deliverable has to be given the next day. So it was little initially like first 6 months was for really. For me it was experimenting and actually getting adapted to that particular system. But perhaps I think 6 months, I believe we're getting into non-comfort zone, and that's where I think it helped me to actually pick it up later. And by the time I was exiting, I actually happened to be one of the happened to acquire that skill in a quite good level in terms of application and doing a lot of other stuff. So agility was there everywhere. And in fact, when I got into like KB also, my primary role, it was not because I was CA, it is because of my persona. It was because of the skill sets that I had acquired. It's because of the things I like to experiment and do over a period of time. That's what helped me to actually add a value there as well. And perhaps this has been throughout. I'll just give you one instance. Soon after I started my entrepreneur journey, so I was building something into a tech space, which is more to do with a SaaS product. I was so frustrated to find a tech co-founder. I started actually learning no code. And then in fact, I built my own app. So that's where I started realizing there's a lot of possibilities beyond. And perhaps you have to be more curious to actually learn new things, and that's why agile. Coming to first principles thinking, I think I adapted, and I've been using this for like last 1 year. It's basically fundamentally, if I have to say, questioning the question, getting to the crux of what really matters in the startup, or what really matters in the problem that you're solving. And then if you think from first principle, I think most of the times you tend to not take a FOMO-based decisions, or tend to not go with the flow what people say. So I think that's what has been helped me to actually exercise first principle thinking.
That is so true. Now you mentioned that you had a transition from GT to EY, and while you were having this transitioning, you jumped from risk advisory to more on a transaction advisory side. So, what was your experience in EY, and how do you think that experience at a Big Four can shape up any person's career?
From GT to EY, definitely there was a change in the stream, and definitely questions why you want to actually shift, and perhaps you don't know after 1 year you might shift somewhere else. But perhaps for me it was actually getting closer to that VC and startup ecosystem. I had like diversified profile, and then perhaps the more and more diversified you have, the perspective which comes to the table is quite different. And then what we were doing technically on business modeling side, on business structuring side, fund structuring side, there was always a different acumen which is required. And then perhaps and that's one of the things which I also tell a lot of my fellow residents. I think I had a privilege of working with a diversified set of clients and funds throughout my journey. In fact, a startup, it could be ranging from a pre-seed to like unicorn, and also where there's a SPAC and listing which has happened, and then also a dynamics of VC space where like working with tier one VCs and all of the stuff. But I think what got into the core and what really worked for me was it was always that business acumen which was carrying. Perhaps like see through to like any business model. So it's always there, and I've been like doing this for like last 7-8 years. Coming to like Big Four as a career, definitely I believe that it adds a lot of value. It inculcates your personality in a way like you can actually deal with a lot of other stuff in your career line. Perhaps if you want to be a CFO, or if you choose to be like a partner in your whatever service line that you choose, or also I believe like the way the Big Fours are working right now, there is a lot of scope of like innovation which they are also inculcating. जैसे कि EY had something called as HULT based MBA, which was more like tech driven, but anyone can take it. Anyone can start learning new skills, and I believe like all the Big Fours are going in that direction, because primarily like having one skill set doesn't work. You need to acquire more and more skill set to actually evolve into whatever career line or whatever things you want to do over a period of time. Yeah.
So
I think it was
thank you for sharing. I just wanted to ask you that how you got involved with Konnectbox. When you started as a CA, was it something that was in your mind that you wanted to try all these things? Or it was like, I want to go with the flow? Was that the whole idea behind the experimenting?
So, Vyoma, this is an interesting question. In fact, for me, how it turned out to be is my dad is an entrepreneur, businessman. I've seen him building textile businesses like since my early childhood. In fact, when I was in 10th standard or perhaps in college, also first few, second few, I happened to go to shops. I had seeing him like cross selling, seeing him to acquire customer, trying to understand insights. All of those are fundamental to any business, whether you're doing a startup or you're doing any business. But that is a crux which gets into it. I had a lot of friends who were actually into business space or doing different stuff. Entrepreneurial journey is something which I'm looking at. So that was first thing which was there in the mind, right? As I told you, right, the business acumen, which was something which was already there. And then I was exercising this right from like PUC, like it could be a college fest, it could be corporate expo, it could be product launch. I was exercising it throughout. Even when I was like doing my internship with like one of the top firm in Bangalore, and any clients which I was actually handling, one of the managing partner of that particular firm, when GST was just born, he put me there कि भाई तुम lead कर. There was one partner, but you lead it. And then at that point of time, I was just third year intern. And then I was part of the professional arena where you're constantly evolving, advising, understanding what could go, how the law will evolve, how do you exactly help people with transitioning. So there were two primary options which I had. Like one was getting into valuation as a division. There were quite a lot of PwC deals and all which was happening. Number two was to get into risk advisory. Number three was to try into an iBanking stuff, like untraditional path where you can actually get closer to that space. I think why I chose risk advisory was primarily because Grant Thornton gave that flexibility to operate with multiple industries, and perhaps that's where I thought, yeah, chalo process optimization. What gets into stitching the entire journey of that business, right? The processes has to speak to each other, and that's when the efficient flow of the organization happens. So I think that's where I started, and I happened to be in a good space where I happened to do some engagements which were I think first of the kind which were done, and perhaps we happened to do it really well. A lot of good feedbacks though, and then that's where I started realizing, okay, there's something which can be explored more and more, and then in fact you realize your strengths. कि यार ये कर सकता हूँ, तो I can in fact go a step further. And then perhaps next, when EY happened, again it was more instinct driven. I had one thing in my mind, yeah, next abhi VC, or I have to get into VC or startup ecosystem, and then that's where consulting was one of the way which was a low hanging fruit is what I call. So basically the evolution was I had entrepreneur somewhere in my mind. When I got into EY, I realized, okay, so this is how entrepreneurial journey worked. When I was into KB, I realized, okay, what gets into entrepreneurial journey really, but not being a spectator, what actually gets into it. And then eventually taking that step of actually being into an own entrepreneur journey. So I think the evolution was quite straight. It was first to actually have it in your mind. Number two, it's gradually evolving into being a spectator, then getting your hands dirty, and then finally getting into your own journey.
That's really fabulous. At Konnectbox, you were the AVP for strategy and finance. What was your contribution to Konnectbox? And you mentioned getting your hands dirty and getting out there. So, how much of that did you learn from Konnectbox?
So, Vyama, I think so. Basically, I think designation doesn't matter when you're into a seed stage startup. When you're part of a founding team, right? You want to always select the best person who has like that skill set, who can bring a lot of things on the table. Of course, for me, it was like taking of course, I was leading finance, strategy, and legal, but perhaps that over a period of like 1 or 2 months, I actually started getting into micro projects. I was leading the projects, like where there was some development onto like some SaaS based product or something which goes into like tech. I was leading all of those things. Eventually, actually started getting into like inside the business, started building that team 0 to 1. Looked at a lot of hirings. In fact, went to like met like, so for us it was B2B marketplace is something which we were doing. Actually went down to like speak to 100 plus manufacturers, spoke to a lot of customers, understood okay what why it is important to have that customer based startup where you understand the consumer need and then you start building upon it. So all of those learnings is actually like speaking to a manufacturer down there, and actually understanding here what your problems are, what your pain points are, what is that company or any other person in the market is not solving, and perhaps you backward work on building it. So with all of this journey, it's actually a lot of it's quite promising, and at the same time it's quite satisfying also, because when you're building right from down there to like building a startup up, it's just -1 to 0. That's a challenging job, but at the same time it's just also gratifying, because you really understand what the dynamics are. And if I have to just put it into one liner, it is basically I realized the potential which was actually to get into building. So the mindset of like actually looking at the possibilities, not just at one stream. It could be anything. It could be fintech, SaaS, gaming, anything. The possibility which can happen, and perhaps like if you can do it, that's something which is unlocked in this entire journey of KB. So that has been like not summary of the experience and stint there.
Okay, so I would like to, ask one more interesting question. You were a mentor at Expertrons, right? Your job as a mentor was to share industry experience with people who are aspiring job seekers. I'm asking about specific people who have professional qualifications. That one advice that you want to give them if they want to get into a finance-based startup, what would that be?
See, it would be that don't restrict yourself to like doing one stuff. Get your hands dirty on more and more new areas. Perhaps you don't know. There's something called as ICAI as a concept, right? The finances sometimes goes it goes very monotonous in terms of job. If you're doing compliance, you end up doing compliance. If you're doing audit, you end up doing audit. If you're doing tax, you end up being there. But you really and then like some of them don't like doing it, or perhaps they think that they could do something else which is much better. I don't know. Like it could be like someone who likes risk advisory much better than the statutory audit. It could be that as an example, or someone like tax better than transfer pricing, right? So I think initial career line, it's like let's first 4 years or 5 years. It's very important for you to find like what gratifies you, what actually helps you to go back to a sound sleep, and then you believe that okay, I've done this, and then I'm very happy doing that. But I think perhaps when you're into mid stage, I believe you would have already figured it out, what really you want to do. But perhaps वो भी नहीं हो रहा है, तो I believe like always there is a way out. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of skills which is actually available. And startup and founder community, I believe it's quite open. Everyone likes to help each other because founder journey is quite lonely, and everyone wants to share their thoughts. Everyone wants to help other. Everyone wants to like actually give that one insight which can help you to break through. And I believe it's quite open. The world is actually growing. Reach out to anyone whom you believe like could add value or could give you a better perspective in shaping your career. I think that's a long short answer, but the one is again it's coming from my journey. Be agile enough, try to experiment with few things and try to figure out what really suits you, or what really where you find your more satisfaction or gratification at the end of the day.
Okay, so you are saying that the startup community is very welcoming and they are always ready to help. How did Antler happen? How did you get to be a part of an organization like that? And what has impacted in terms of your career or in terms of the stealth startup that you are working on?
So there were multiple ideas which I'm working on. which I was working on a few months back, and I believe there's a market for everything now, and I believe some of them could be actually a good impactful problem built from India for India and globally perhaps. So while I was doing all of these things, again for me the limitation was that finding that tech co-founder or co-founder who can actually help you to bring this to a life. This product is just the thesis is in my brain, but it has to be someone has to build it. Perhaps I'm not a techie to actually build it, right? So that's where again my friend Rohit Jain, he just happened to tell me, yeah, there's something with like Antler. In fact, I knew Antler from my stint from EY also, and then also that. He happened to tell me, okay, there's a specific program. Why don't you give it a shot? Because the Antler program was more focused on finding a co-founder match and also validating your thesis, and then it goes on to funding and onward journeys towards it. And that's where I thought, okay, it's a good idea. Why not give it a shot? And I gave it a shot. There were like multiple rounds of interviews. There's a lot of things which get into actually getting through it. And then perhaps I think that was a decision-making factor why I actually chose Antler. It was primary reason because I wanted a person who's a techie and who can be a potential tech co-founder. Co-founder is something which there's a lot of aspiration, there's a lot of things which gets into it when you actually want to choose a person as a co-founder, because you don't want to actually get into a phase where things don't work up and then downwards. So I'll take some time, in fact, to choose the right person with whom I want to build.
You are a resident entrepreneur at Antler. So what does that exactly mean?
So there's a difference here. But when I say entrepreneur and resident, it could be, let's say there's a company A which is a unicorn. And that company wants to do some sort of a project which is quite let's say someone in fintech wants to get into gaming, hypothetical example, and that there's a division where he doesn't want to, the founder doesn't want to build it himself, but he wants to have an entrepreneurial mindset, or he wants a person who can actually help him do it, right? So that's where there's openings, like it's a full-time job. Of course, you get salary, you get stock options and all of those things, but you're leading there, let's say as a project CEO. So the vision is of that the founder of that particular unicorn, but you're helping him to build it, because it could be like you match the skill set, or it could be perhaps you believe in that vision, or perhaps you also believe that no, that's a good problem statement to solve. So it's a different profile, entrepreneur in residence. What Antler is doing is quite different. It's basically you do your own journey, and Antler is a global fund. So for them, eventually, it's basically carving out to do the entire journey and then funding it. So the both are different things. You take your own journey at entrepreneur, but when you're an entrepreneur and resident in any startup, it means that you're working for that startup, building, let's say, another set of projects or product, or let's say venturing into a new market.
Absolutely. Choosing a right partner to step in the direction that you want is very important. So I'm asking this question that if I want to start a startup today, what are the things that I need to look for?
Sure. So, Vayama, so basically, I didn't learn coding, I learned no code. So no code is a tech where you need not know coding, but you can still build a tech. So why I choose that was not primarily because I wanted to build it myself. It was because I wanted to get an MVP, the minimum viable product, out soon and test it with the users. Because having that POC being established is very important, because otherwise you don't know whether the product that you build is actually in need of the market demand. You know what direction, whether you're thinking right, whether your thesis is right, whether this is a market demand. So that's why I learned it, because having a co-founder is right. Number two, I think there's a lot of other elements which gets into it. Perhaps I'm assuming that the thesis is whatever thesis you're working on is something which you've figured it out. There's a market validation which is happening. I think beside all of these things, your founding team is one of the core. Having the right founding team who can be your potential bidders. Of course, it's again what I call it as your human capital. These are the people on whom you're building. These are the people who actually help you to get your visions right. So figuring out the right set of founding team, it's very important. And then I think later the things can be figured out, because many startups, they started with something and they pivoted into a lot of different things. It could happen during your journey, but that ecosystem, right? And then that's that small team or the team that you work with, right? That's where the magic happens. So that's, in fact, so these are the two elements, but of course there are a lot of other elements which gets into it. But this is with the primary assumption that you figured out your thesis, you figured out what you want to build, you figured out your POCs and all of this stuff.
Okay. So, when I talk to you, there are two things that I really, really admire. One is the energy. The second is the passion for creating something new, or for the knack for problem solving. Do you think that there are any other things that helped you as a founder in your journey?
Yeah, so I would say definitely these are the few things definitely, but again there's a lot more things which gets into it. Let's say you need to be patient enough. You can't be like so aggressive when things don't work out, and there's always there's always a setback which may happen because the journey is not like one linear curve. It's always like ups and downs. I believe there's a lot of other things which gets into it. When you want to build a team, there's a different set of skills which is required. When you want to actually get your product out fast. If I have to add one more thing, right? It would be like that skill to manage people, that skill to actually get your things navigated very calmly, patiently, but ensuring that it's actually floating in the right direction. Different founders have different set of skill sets, and many times it works for them. So again, what one more thing which I realized being in this residency was there's always a reflection of your own personality traits, of your own persona, and I think that's how it works. If you look at a lot of founders who are there into startup ecosystem, not everyone has the same sort of a personality trait, right? So someone would be different, someone is another different persona, but everyone has built on the strengths. Everyone has figured out, okay, this is something which I am good at, this is something which I can do best at, and then perhaps you try to navigate. If I am not good at something, then definitely I need a co-founder who can be matching that skill set, or if I need that person in the founding team who can actually lead it on my behalf. I think the overall agenda as a founder is you need not be the smartest person in your team, or you need not have all the skill sets, but as finding the right person who can actually do it along with you for the
For
larger
you.
vision, that's something which is more important. Again, going back in one line summary, knowing your own persona, building it on that, reflecting it and building it on those strengths is something which will definitely help a lot. Of course, strategizing is there, but execution is as more important as that. I believe that's one of the important skills to play when you're having an entrepreneur journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. But if there is a person who approaches you, who's just fresh out of graduation, and he asks you that what are the prominent career paths to get into the startup ecosystem while learning about it. So, what would your suggestions be?
See, it would technically, if I have to divide, then it's going to be like three prominent paths. If you can figure out a way to get into an investment banking or a VC, it's very closer to that ecosystem. You start interacting with a lot of founders. You start having a good face time with them, and then perhaps then you can actually work on your skill set, actually work on what really you want to do. So that could be a good start point there. And I believe the space is quite opening up right now for CAs as well, because the primary reason, if you're thinking it right, CAs is not just about audit, tax, or doing traditional modes. It's much more beyond. Which is basically, if I have to like put it into one word, right, it's basically you have that entire financial capabilities and understanding of the business that you can actually build on it. So you already have that foundation set. And I don't think so now. Gone are the days where people say, okay, the CA's presentation skills are this thing, MBAs are better. I don't want to undermine it, but at the same time, I think there's enough room and there's enough exposure where you can build on all of these things. In fact, you can compete at par with anyone, right? And it's all to do with your acumen. So this is one bit of it. Number two, you can actually think of getting into there's quite a lot of teams like deals, transaction advisories, where you do due diligence. Always you again find out FaceTime with the founders. You have happen to have an exposure with different set of startups, right? So that is the second way of doing it. Number three, if you have an opportunity to get into a founding team of any company, perhaps through your networks, perhaps through angel, perhaps reaching out cold, that's a fantastic way of starting it. Because if you're part of a founding team, right, and again I always tell, it's basically if you want to get into a startup, the metrics is like if pre-seed to unicorn, the person who is into like pre-seed or seed kind of a startup, he's part of the founding team, he learns a lot. He's of course taking a risky bet, but perhaps his inculcation or the way his journey actually shapes him is quite different. But and then against person who's working in a unicorn or joining that sort of startup, the risk is quite less there. But at the same time, the learning is quite restricted to the divisions that you're handling. There's a fourth one. In fact, this is something which is just coming up right now. It is entrepreneur in residence. It's many companies are coming up with this sort of a profiles. Again, it's a quite dynamic profile. It requires a lot of skill sets, but perhaps I believe with right set of mind, with right set of skills, thoughts, communication, and then also executing it. I think that can be cracked also. But yeah, these are the broadly 3+1 stream where you can actually start navigating towards your journey.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Vipul, for sharing so many things about how the startup ecosystem works. It was a true delight talking to you.